Hi, everyone. This is Nathan with People's Town Hall. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to the simple idea that our democracy is stronger and better when our lawmakers take regular occasion to meet with and listen to the people they work for, which is their constituents. We are joining you today virtually in Harney County, Oregon. I'm told it is a beautiful spring day, Friday afternoon, so I thank everyone who is joining us virtually for this conversation. I know there's so much to do this afternoon and this weekend. If you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love if you could share and or like this video to let folks in your community know it is happening. It could show up on their feed, help the algorithm do its work, and make sure people are aware of this vital community conversation. Senator Wyden, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, Nathan, thanks for doing this. I so wish that I could be with all of you in person today in Harney County. This was not the plan. What I was hoping to do was leave Washington, D.C. Yesterday, that would have been Thursday, early evening, and get to Boise late and then drive to Eastern Oregon. However, the United States Senate, as it is prone to do, had other ideas. And so we just stayed and of course had to make sure that the government stayed open. So it was just impossible to actually get to Harney County. I will be there again in person soon. I've had 1,000 in-person town hall meetings, and I don't think there's any substitute for doing that. And we'll be back at it. Glad that everything's opening up and everybody's pleased about that, and school and so many things that we've missed. And I also want to give a big shout out to Nathan and the good people at People's Town Hall, because they have been basically opening the doors of digital democracy. So today we're going to hear from people in Harney County who wanted to be heard, and there's a lot going on. And so that'll be the end of my speech making for the day. And Nathan, let's just go to it and cover whatever people are interested in. And Harney County has a history of not being shy. So don't go breaking with precedent, okay? All right, everybody.
Great. And just for folks watching, we do not screen these questions by party affiliation, who you voted for, if you even voted. This is an open conversation for all Oregonians in Harney County. First up, we have Judge Pete Runnels. Thanks for joining us.
Nathan. Thank you, Nathan. Hello, Senator. Welcome to Harney County virtually.
Hey, Pete. I'm gonna be there in person sometime soon. I'm so frustrated that the logistics didn't work out, but we'll do this in person soon.
Well, I'll bet you never thought your thousandth town hall when you hit it was going to be virtual when you started them years ago.
Well, you know what I've been doing, Pete, and that's what was so frustrating is I get in the car when I get home in Portland. I try to get to bed early, and I get up super early, and we drive to the county. And then we might go to the Madras Pioneer or the Central Oregonian or the Hermiston Herald, and then we'll have the meeting from there. And then I go out and talk with people in the community. So we're trying to always have the best of both worlds, but the United States Senate wasn't cooperating last night. So I'm sitting behind my desk in the Dirksen Senate office building in Washington, D.C.
Not a problem. So we appreciate you taking the time. One, thank you for some funding that was announced officially in the last couple of days. We had the big package for communications, very much appreciated. That will be put to good use out here, I guarantee you that. And when I saw you a couple of weeks ago, I pressed you on the local assistance and tribal consistency fund, and I understand we're still having some issues there.
But we're getting there, and so folks will have an idea what we're talking about. And Pete deserves a lot of credit for constantly making the case, since we're such a public land state. The Secure Rural Schools Bill and the PILT program and the combination, which I put together, has brought Oregon under my law about $3.5 billion. So that's with a B, is probably the biggest authorization of funds that, in terms of any single one item that we've had. And still, we find so much hurt, as we know, in the rural part of the state. So I was very pleased to be able to get a new county and tribal payments program into the COVID relief bill that passed the Senate. This is different than what we've had, as I say, with secure rural schools. It would be, in addition, for the tribes, $250 million per year, a first of its kind approach that would help the tribal governments pay for services like water, infrastructure, and healthcare, and for the counties, a new program to try to look at ways to deal with unemployment and land values and poverty rates. And this is designed, and I put it together with my Republican colleagues from Idaho and Senator Merkley. It's designed to get counties off this kind of financial roller coaster. So the Senate has passed the technical fix that Pete is talking about. And we're just working to get that legislation through the House. So talking to Congressman Benz and all the folks in the House that we can, I think Pete is also another good step. This has been totally bipartisan, as I say. Senator Krapos, Senator Risch from our neighbors in Idaho have been great champions, but we got it through the Senate, we got to get it through the House, but just keep pressing the case and tell all your friends in counties around the country.
Will do. Thank you. I appreciate that. That package you put together is, of all the COVID relief packages that came out, this one, because of our low population, is the big hitter for us. So we appreciate it and look forward to the day it's on its way. Thank you.
Well, we're going to keep prosecuting the case, and you know, Cliff knows a lot about these issues. Took Congressman Walden's place. A lot of other Western members know a lot about it. So let's just spread the word and tell everybody it's as bipartisan it could be. 2 Ds, 2 Rs in the Senate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
will let the next person go.
Good.
Thanks.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us, Judge. Next up, we have Lynn from Burns.
Thank you for taking my question. Hello, Senator Wyden. I am glad that you took action on the Postal Service Reform Act, but I am concerned that you now have made a bigger and more complicated problem with Medicare solvency. What are you going to do to ensure that Medicare will not go broke in 2026, adding the postal workers into this formula and not fully funding it?
Well, Lynn, you're asking about an important issue, and we can make the report that the budget office did with respect to the Postal Service available to you. This does not harm the Medicare Trust Fund with respect to this bill, but we have a really big challenge with the Medicare Trust Fund generally, particularly what's called Part A, the hospital portion. So here are the 2 areas that I feel really strongly about. I mean, certainly we ought to be letting Medicare negotiate to hold down the price of prescription medicine. I think it is absurd that Medicare is basically the only place around that doesn't negotiate. And I've worked on this effort to hold prescription medicine prices down in a bipartisan way again. Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican of Iowa, and he was for basically our whole package except for the negotiations. And I finally took him aside and I said, Chuck, you know, 85% of the American people seem to be in favor of Medicare negotiating to hold down medicine. And tell you the truth, when I'm home having town meetings, I can't find the other 15%. They must be in a witness protection program, because I've never met an Oregonian who doesn't favor holding down medicine by letting people negotiate. So my hope is that we're going to get that passed. And I mean, we know these prices like insulin drugs. Insulin prices have gone up 7 or 8 fold in recent years, and the drug is 7 or 8 times better. It's the same insulin that we've had essentially for 50 years. So that's number one. Number two, You may have heard that I proposed a billionaire income tax. I think this idea that Elon Musk and Bezos and these guys can pay little or no income taxes for years because they buy and borrow and die, don't take a wage, they ought to pay something. So those are two places where I'm going to start in terms of getting the additional revenue plus cost containment. Very important issue. And I think you probably know my background was working with the elderly. I was director of the Gray Panthers for about 7 years. So this is like really sacred turf for me. You know, when we began Medicare in 65, and, you know, I was still in school, but my goodness, at that time, elderly folks went to poor farms. It was shameful. Now we've got a program that's been a lifeline for a lot of people. It's not perfect, but it's sure helped so many people. It's been such a godsend. Okay. By the way, if anybody wants to respond or say, Ron, you don't know what you're talking about, or whatever you want to do, that's fine too. Okay.
We never fully funded Part D.
Well, a couple of things. I think there were only about, I don't know, 7 Democrats who voted for Part D. I was one of them because I thought we just had to get going. Now, it didn't have all the cost containment that I wanted. It didn't have the Medicare could negotiate. So your point is well taken. Medicare, you know, and now we have the various, you know, parts and Medigap and the like. Still, I think I'd characterize it as a godsend, because I remember, you know, back in the days when I taught gerontology, my wife said, "What's gerontology?" And so I said, "It's about elderly folks." And we read about poor farms. They had them in East Multnomah County, up in the metro area. So thank God that we don't warehouse people today in places like that. But Part D, we had to get started. I don't know any other way to say it, Lynn. And I talked to the D's and R's back then, and, you know, they said, well, Bush is involved and all the rest. I said, my God, I've been hearing that for years and years. We got to get going. We got to get going. And now the next step is more cost containment. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Lynn. Next up, we have Dan Grigg in Hines.
Hello, Senator.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, I have two things, if that's okay. One, representing the healthcare industry as a hospital administrator, and the other, just a question as a United States citizen. The first one, from a hospital standpoint, we've been very challenged over this last year, and it's not just us in Harney County, it's across the nation and across the state, with travel agencies for nurses. What used to be a $60 an hour travel agency nurse now is over $200 an hour. And it's really not sustainable for us, especially as a small hospital, but I think hospitals in general. And the state of Oregon was going to address it, but then they backed out, feeling that those travel agencies would just shun Oregon. And so I really think it needs to be addressed at a federal level. It's just not sustainable, and it's adding costs to the healthcare system, and eventually will run hospitals out of business if it continues.
Yeah. So what Dan is talking about is a byproduct of how broken the healthcare workforce system is. And so in the last couple of years, because we've had them for a long time, as you know, Dan, but it's really accelerated because we have such a shortage of nurses right now. You got these outfits, they're national, who basically come in and they say to nurses who are working, hey, wouldn't you like to work less and get double the pay? And I've been meeting them because we've got all of those nurses around Oregon. And a bunch of them said, Ron, you know, I love my town. I love being a nurse, but I got bills to pay. And my spouse is not able to work now or got COVID or something. They say, I got to do it. And so I understand why a nurse is saying that, Dan. And the irony is, I've been in communities in Oregon where the nurse who lives on 45 such and such Vine Street continues to live at 45 Vine Street, but just doesn't serve as a nurse 40 hours a week where they work, but becomes a traveling nurse and goes back and forth, a little bit. I'll tell you, I don't think there's any solution to this other than things like providing low-cost tuition so that it's more attractive to get people into the profession. I hope that hospitals and other facilities create incentive programs to keep nurses, but I don't see a government solution here. I think we've got to have public-private partnerships. I think government can play a role in helping to reduce the tuition, to subsidize it. I think the facilities have to play a role in boosting salaries for people, who are staying and retaining their positions. But I don't think there's a government solution here. Maybe you thought that I would say that there was, but I don't think there is.
No, I mean, we very much value our nurses and want them all to stay and be here with us. The reality is some of them have left to travel, and we have lots of travelers here. And as much as we'd love to pay every nurse $200 an hour, we just can't. And so we're trying to pay as much as we can and still keep our doors open.
I think if there's some government help on the front end with nurses not racking up so much debt, because one of the things that they told me is I owe so much from school, and then on top of that, I'm exhausted, and I can make more money paying down my debt and do it with shorter hours. I don't want to leave the place that I've worked at for 15 years, but it's not a close call given my family and financial situation. Government helps on the front end. If the hospitals can help with some incentive plans, I think we can get through it.
Okay, second question. This is not representing the hospital, but representing just myself as a U.S. citizen. Very, very concerned about the war in Ukraine. And I know that the president there has asked over and over for support for a no-fly zone. And I feel like I know we're doing economic sanctions. I know there's other things that are being done, providing them weapons, providing them other, tools. But for us as a free nation to help another people that want to be a free nation, it just feels like we should be doing more than we're doing. And I know that Congress has a big role to play in that, along with President Biden.
Well, first of all, Dan, it's so good to hear somebody talk about how important this is. My parents fled the Nazis. Not everybody got out. The Wyden family knows a little bit about what it's like living under an autocrat. And I think Vladimir Putin just thought that he could kind of march in to Ukraine. There are a lot of Russians who live in Ukraine, and they'd all be waving, Russian flags, and he'd just come on in there and install a puppet government. And I think he has had quite a surprise here recently. I sit on the Intelligence Committee. My older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee, giving me a little bit of a poke. And what I can tell you is Putin has suffered a lot of setbacks. And I think he is increasingly feeling, cornered. I'm also chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. We're upping the economic sanctions every day. We crank them up a little bit more. Just in the last 24 hours, I've been involved with Democrats and Republicans to take away most favored nation status for trade purposes for Putin. It puts a big squeeze on his financial resources. And today I announced, Wall Street Journal reporting it, about how we would take away tax breaks for companies here in our country that have done business, with Russia and are continuing to do it. So we are going to keep the pressure on. We continue to support efforts to assist without putting troops on the ground. With respect to the no-fly zone, I just don't see how you constrain that so that we don't have planes just shooting at each other and pushing us towards a major conflict that some argue could escalate to World War III. You just don't fly planes around and, occasionally they look at each other or perhaps do a little bit more. I think this is the kind of conflict that could very quickly escalate. And I'm very, very hesitant to pursue a no-fly zone. But you're making good arguments. We've got to, and then of course we have significant responsibilities under NATO, and we're continuing to recognize the responsibilities. Ukraine is not a member, but we continue to honor our responsibilities if Putin under Title V attacks a NATO member.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Dan. Next up, we have Marjorie in Burns.
Hello, Senator Wyden.
Hello.
I have a question about the Wild and Scenic Rivers Bill. I think it's called Rivers for Democracy Act.
I heard of that.
And I'd like to know more about it and how it would benefit Harney County.
Well, a couple of things. My view is that first and foremost, recreation is now a big economic engine for our state. It's a big multiplier. And so if you have recreation and businesses selling equipment and guides and restaurants and breweries and gas stations, all of the things that generate revenue, I think that's a plus for a part of our state where we're looking for an economic, engine. Now, that economic engine also involves clean drinking water and a number of things that our farmers and communities care about: protecting property rights, grazing, irrigation water rights, reducing wildfire risk, all of these things. So what I did is I spent many, many months putting out to communities, I'd like your nominations for rivers that would be included in a wild and scenic rivers system. And what we did is ask senior citizens and churches and schools and the like. We got 15,000 nominations. And we also asked about how we could try some new approaches that reflected major new challenges for Harney County and Oregon. For example, we now have a major fire risk reduction provision in this bill, where essentially the federal land managers, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management would have to designate management plans so as to make sure you're reducing fire risk in these areas. So private property, grazing, dealing with fire risk were all issues that communities raised. We continue to raise them. Pete and others have raised them for Harney County. And Marjorie, I can just tell you, I don't believe you write bills in Washington, D.C., and then you put on a blue suit and go running around telling everybody what to do. We took the ideas from Oregon. We continue to take the ideas. We continue to try to refine the bill. But I do think that we need to look at some new opportunities for rural Oregon. I happen to think technology continues to be one, because with broadband and the like, and Pete has been talking with the county commissioners about the benefits of that. As Dan knows, improving our healthcare facilities, because rural Oregon is so attractive to a lot of people who are interested in retiring. And then having recreation, because that gets you outdoors and that's good for everybody physically, and it pumps money into the community. So that's a little bit of how it's done. We had our first hearing on the bill, and one of the ranchers from rural Oregon represented the region, the cattle, remember the Cattlemen's Association and the like. And she said, I really love the provisions for clean drinking water, because that's really important for my ranch. So those are the protections, and I'll let you ask about anything specific that you'd like to, because I appreciate it. And my objective is to really strike a balance. What we want is recreation, habitat, conservation, fire risk. Hundreds of rural small businesses, Marjorie, have endorsed the bill. We can send you a list of that. But I don't believe that you just say, oh, that's the end of it. We're just going to keep working on it. And for those who believe, as I do, that we've got a thriving outdoor recreation economy now, and we can grow it, this bill, I think, has lots of upside, and we've worked very hard to incorporate the concerns of folks all around the state. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, thank you. That makes it clear. I appreciate that.
Good. And anybody in the course of the discussion who'd like to weigh in, and by the way, people always say, oh, I didn't want to come on, I oppose something Ron had done. That's not the Oregon way. We talk our issues through. I welcome people's position on all sides of the issue. And by the way, I don't have all the answers, and nobody in the Senate does. What I know is we do better in terms of a solution by practicing the Oregon way and trying to listen to people, get their ideas, improve them, go back and forth. And we've had a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans and a lot of independents and people all across the political spectrum who've helped our state be better and stronger because they've done it. And that's what we're trying to follow. Let's follow that model.
Terrific. Well, thanks for joining us, Marjorie. Next up, we have Robert from Burns. Robert, I think you're on here as John. I'm sorry. In the submission form, it was Robert. Apologies.
That, and Robert's my legal name. So I was interested in how we could get the money, the dirty money, out of politics. Our elections are extremely expensive, and they're controlled by the people with the most money. And I think that's wrong. I've proposed, and I've heard of this for a long time. The American Anti-Corruption Act says corporations are not people. Can you address that? Can we have elections that are for the people?
Yeah, I think you're basically describing one of the reasons I've always tried to have all these open meetings, because people really, we're a long way from Washington, D.C. Oregon's 3,000 miles away. People say the system's rigged. I mean, I'm fighting big pharma on the pharmaceutical prices. Lynn asked me about the Medicare trust fund. I'm taking big oil on. Here we are, we're getting clobbered at the pump right now, and they're making record profits. So you bet. I mean, you ought to be able to hold every member of Congress accountable. It's one of the reasons I do all these town halls. I'm a co-sponsor with a number of my colleagues of the Spotlight Act to really force disclosure of donors. I'm a co-sponsor of the Freedom to Vote Act because I don't want democracy to be for sale. And, right now I have pressed the government agencies in both political parties to take on these powerful interests. When the Obama administration was in, I pushed them to describe why doctors with pharmacies were selected to be on an opioid abuse advisory, panel. And I pushed the Trump administration for the same reason. So these issues are not partisan ones. And, people are asking about the various pieces of, financial, legislation. I do not trade in individual stocks, and I'm going to be supportive of legislation to ban members of Congress from trading in individual stocks. So it ought to be as clear as Crater Lake that members of Congress work for the people, not for these special interests.
Well, we had 2 senators blocking everything that the Senate was trying to get through. I think one of them was very beholden to pharmaceutical money, and one of them was very beholden to coal or oil money. I mean, they have special interests. They're not taking care of the people. They're taking care of their investments. And I don't see how we can run a country like that.
I guess the other point, John, is that we badly need to change the filibuster rules. And
I agree with that.
I would like to see us go to the talking filibuster. And a lot of people remember the movie Jimmy Stewart Goes to Washington, and he talked until he fell over, and he was a youthful, slim guy, and everybody sent him cookies, and he just kept standing there trying to keep talking and all the rest. So a number of years ago, we Oregonians voted for death with dignity. We voted twice. And the House of Representatives wanted to get rid of our bill. They voted to get rid of it, came to the Senate, and everybody said, we'll just get rid of it. It was right after I came to the Senate, and they said, we don't even know who's like in the Senate from there. It was kind of like we were just out of the picture. And I said, well, we might be 3,000 miles away from Washington, but you better believe you're going to know who I am by the time we're done with this, because our people voted for it twice. So I filibustered it. And when the dust settled, we won. Oregon's death with dignity law remained there. What Oregonians had voted for still stood. By the way, at the beginning, I wasn't even for this because I was afraid vulnerable seniors might get hurt. I was wrong. I said so. But I think part of this is passing these laws to, hold everybody accountable. I mentioned 3 or 4 of them. But I think we do need, John, to change these rules with respect to the filibuster, and I'm for a talking filibuster.
Well, thank you very much. I got one more question is pressing seriously, as we have a serious water problem here in Oregon, and OWRD is not functioning. The federal government has spent millions of dollars on a United States Geological Survey study, and we're continuing to pump our aquifer dry. We know we're not getting any rain, and we're pumping immense amounts, and I'm worried about the future of our state. And it's a problem all over the country. I mean, they're having the same problem in Kansas and the Midwest. We're not getting as much rain as they're pumping out, and wells are going dry.
Hang on just 1 second. John, I can tell you the bipartisan infrastructure bill does make some money available to farmers and others to try some new conservation practices and others. It is a national problem, and what we're trying to do with piping systems and the like is something that you'll certainly be seeing me spend more time on in the future. It affects irrigation and farms, and a significant amount of money in the bipartisan infrastructure bill has been designated to focus on this.
but the Water Resource Department is permitting way too much more water than what exists. And they knew that back in 15 before all these studies started. They admit they should have declared a swamp back in 2015. The scientists do, but whoever makes the decision keeps giving out permits and keeps giving out people to change their location, move and pump another place dry. What are we going to do when there's no water left?
Well, that's the point of this new focus, John. Instead of just pretending everybody can have as much as they want every single minute, what these new dollars in the bipartisan infrastructure bill are going to go for is water efficiency measures, piping projects to improve the irrigation systems. It's all about water conservation and moving away from what you're talking about, John, which is overpromising and just saying everybody can have everything they want every minute.
Well, I think something needs to happen before too long. Even if we stop spraying water in the air, they said, and put the water right down on the ground, we're still pumping out more water than is there because we're not getting any new water coming in. We're in a tremendous drought. We're lucky to get an inch of rain last year, and now we haven't got hardly any rain this winter, and they're going to start pumping again like there's no tomorrow. And when it's gone, it's gone. I mean, in the beginning of all this, I had a scientist gave us a talk saying, when you pump so much out and the ground collapses, it can't even recharge. So we're destroying while we're waiting around talking about this for 7 years. We need to have the resource.
So the other thing I would add, John, is that climate change has also been a significant factor because it drives drought. And I have just, as the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, gotten legislation passed to basically throw the tax code in the trash can and take strong measures to deal with climate change, in particular to say that the more you reduce carbon emissions, the bigger your tax savings. So you change the tax code, number one, to reward reducing carbon emissions and deal with climate change. That's a big factor in the drought. Use the bipartisan infrastructure fund, as I said, help the farmers and the ranchers, not just tell everybody you can have as much water as you want every single day, but to promote water efficiency, piping projects, modernization of the irrigation systems, water conservation. You take all these together, that's my view of how you take the best next steps to deal with it. And apropos of your comment, this is a national problem. Absolutely. Water is front and center.
Well, I agree with efficiency, but the scientists have told us that that's not sufficient for the deficit that we're incurring. And there's going to be there's more and more refugees. They're coming out of places that are dried up, and we're going to have refugees coming out of here if we can't reduce the amount of water that we're extracting. That's much more than the water that's coming back down from the sky. Our water is leaving us at a much faster rate than it's
I probably have pummeled this as best I can, but your basic proposition that we better move quickly in a different direction is indisputably right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you, Senator, for coming to Harney County by any method possible. I want to return to the River Democracy Act because I know how hard you worked to lay the basis for this act and how intensely you're competing with Alaska for having the most miles of beautiful rivers, which I agree we do. But I was shocked recently to read the policy manual, the 2022 policy manual for the Public Lands Council. And I was shocked at the strength of their policy opposing the Rivers for Democracy Act. And I'm wondering if you think that this very important constituency of yours is out to do this bill in.
Well, I think, Julie, this bill is overwhelmingly popular across every part of Oregon. Now, I recognize that there are some powerful economic interests that are going to try to say we're better off with the status quo. I don't share that view. For example, they've said, oh, this bill is going to harm our ability to fight fire. I think this bill is going to improve our ability to fight fire. And it is completely consistent, as we heard at the hearing, with where the Forest Service wants to go in terms of fighting fire. So when you unpack the arguments in terms of actually what's being said, we heard that it was going to get rid of private property. So I would give out the page and the bill number. It says you can't touch private property. Same with grazing. So, I'm of the view that the way you legislate is you keep your door open to everybody. Some people said, well, Ron wasn't interested in hearing what folks in the rural part of the state is. And I said, I've heard a lot of things, but after 1,000 town meetings in every county in Oregon every year, I think I've shown that I'm interested in people being heard. And in fact, this summer, Julie, I had a special town hall meeting that covered nothing except the River Democracy Act. So we're going to continue to work that way, and we're going to get this bill passed because it's in Oregon's interest.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right, so that is all of our video questioners, I think. Did I miss anybody? Feel free to raise a hand if I didn't. But yeah, we're going to go to a couple questions online. I have got one. It's an interesting one from Malcolm, who asks how sanctions on Russia might have unintended consequences on the rest of the world with regards to potential famine, global poverty. Senator Wyden, as you're working in Congress to construct or strengthen these sanctions, how are you considering those potential unintended consequences?
Well, it's a very important question. I think it's one of the reasons why I've favored, as you write these sanctions, to make the focus on these powerful economic interests and not that person who is of modest means, who desperately needs, the kind of help that comes to fight hunger and provide medicine and the like. For example, the first thing that I do, Nathan, is I kind of put on a pair of blinders and say, what are these sanctions going to do to cut off Putin's financial resources? What's it going to do to these oligarchs, these tremendously wealthy, people who have been his financial, base? Putin is KGB. Putin is very much committed to this idea of somehow recreating the old Soviet Union. But he's not going to be able to do it if we keep our eye on bringing together these countries and doing it in a way where we put tough financial sanctions around Putin, where we tighten the noose, and we put the focus on these oligarchs and powerful people at the top of the economic system, and steer clear of people of modest means who need help with hunger, fighting hunger and medicine. Now, it's easier said than done as well, because we know Putin has no qualms at all about making these attacks up, putting poor people in the way of efforts to isolate him and the oligarchs and the like. I mean, he certainly is now, and I'm on the intelligence committee, I'm not going to get into anything classified. He's now very much aware that the Ukrainians are much tougher, much stronger, and much more persistent than he expected. And it's very impressive to see Zelensky and their leaders stand up and making it clear they aren't going anywhere. But it's a very good question, and the sanctions and the aid we provide, I do kind of put on a sort of lens to talk about how you really deal with the powerful interests. It's like what I announced, today. It was all about going after multinational companies and others who insisted on doing business, with Putin and the like, and steered clear of kind of collateral effects on people who need help with food and medicine and the like. It's a great question.
Terrific. Well, thanks for the question, Malcolm. We have a question from Patty, who says, it's been difficult to get mapping and full transparency on the River Democracy Act specific details. Senator Wyden, is there a resource or a way that folks like Patty can learn more about that?
Patty, first of all, before anything is done in the formal process of considering this legislation, everybody's going to have maps and plenty of additional, material. One of the reasons that we've been doing the kind of work we have over the last few months is we've had dozens and dozens of meetings with people on all sides, people who love the bill, people who have questions about the bill, people who are not comfortable with the bill. And with respect to the maps, while this is not generally the practice, it's going to be my practice. There are going to be full maps out there for people to get the information they need before this advances.
Terrific. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Patty. We are probably at a good stopping point for today. We're going to be back in 2 more counties in southeastern Oregon tomorrow, Baker and Grant County. Senator Wyden, I believe you will be joining us from our nation's capital for those as well. But we thank everybody who joined us here on the Zoom, everybody who joined us on YouTube and Facebook. Looking forward to talking to more of you tomorrow. And Senator Wyden, feel free to have the last word.
First of all, Harney County never fails to come through. Not a bad question in the House. We started with Commissioner Pete way back at the beginning, talking about how public lands, counties, deal with secure rural schools and PILT and additional measures that can provide resources in tough times. We've talked about water several times. John made some good points with respect to, we wish we had more of it, and what are you going to do to fight droughts? A number of you asked about river democracy, and that was very helpful. Lynn asked about healthcare and the question of Medicare and prescription drugs and how you're going to keep the trust fund solid. And Dan raised this whole question of the healthcare workforce, where we're definitely going to need more people, and we're going to need to rebuild the infrastructure, because a lot of people who were in healthcare 2 years ago have said they're exhausted and they're interested in doing other things. And I think a combination of tuition and retention and trying to make for a more coherent policy rather than to just kind of lurch from sort of one crisis to another will help us get on track. As you know, Dan, early on in the pandemic, I was able to get extra help for Oregon hospitals because we had a lot of the hospitals give up what are called elective surgeries, the better compensated private sector surgeries, because they were helping COVID patients. And I said, look at those Oregon hospitals, always stepping up, trying to deal with emergencies. 3 cheers for them. I'm going to use my position as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee to get them additional help to compensate for the money that was lost with the elective surgeries. So I always enjoy being with you in person, and I'm going to be in Harney County as soon as possible. Pete and the commissioners have worked with us on a host of issues we didn't even really talk about. Infrastructure, but roads and bridges and transportations are pretty important to Harney. We get some of that with secure rural schools. We're going to get some of it with the bipartisan infrastructure proposal law. But these are some of the bread and butter issues that they don't make the most sensational headlines on some cable news show, but they're the nuts and bolts of improving quality of life in our state, particularly in rural Oregon. And that's what I'm spending my time doing. So big thanks to everybody in Harney County. Another good meeting, and by kind of executive order almost, it can't be official, take the rest of the day off. You don't have to do any more giving government good input and holding government accountable. Like Nathan said, he thought it was good weather at home and everybody can get outside and enjoy the incredible air and quality of life in Eastern Oregon. And we'll look forward to seeing you all soon in person, okay? Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, Senator. See you all next time. Take care.